Hi, everybody. This is time for part two of Bruce Campaign's, my first video blog. My blog is brucecampaign.org, and the article is Redefining Sex? No thanks. So, part one was introduction. Part two is titled What is Trans? What is trans? I've been asking myself and others two earnest questions. What is trans? How are trans oppressed? For such basic questions, most trans activists don't seem to be able to give a satisfactory answer, as in an answer that holds up under scrutiny. The best scrutiny coming from radical feminists, or TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists. Being labeled TERF is regarded by many as a scarlet letter. There are many scary people who claim a TERF may be fairly and justly targeted for hate, attacks, and even violence. Hypocrisy is lost. TERFs have been really good at challenging the logic of trans identity, but they aren't purveyors of violence against trans. Their trans exclusionary position isn't them being hateful bigots, it's them having found problems with it, including trans women in their feminist and LGBT positions. They challenge the logic of this new gender ideology that trans promote. A TERF might argue that instead of appealing to elite acceptance, followed by the bullying and brainwashing of the populace to agree, new policies and redefinitions should be debated openly, especially when it directly cuts into the protections afforded women, LGBT, and children, which is more substantial of a concern than the complaint that a self-identifying transgender person can't fulfill completely their fantasy in the real world. Man and woman isn't an old-fashioned concept that needs throwing out. These are the gender terms correlating to definitive biological sex. Gender also delineates sex-based rules by age, boys and girls, as opposed to men and women, or Mr. and Madam. The social constructs of each gender is what it is, and it is in regular need of updating for every culture and community, for every generation, as it does technologies and environment changes. This social construct is overwhelmingly not a written rule book, aside from important legal protections like Title IX, provide women, and demands that relate to men, like registering for the draft. This social construct also falls below the species level understanding of all humans and their rights that are associated with all human rights. The social construct of men and women changes by community, culture, location, wealth, employment, and family. My sister is an anthropologist, and she puts it like this, and I quote, "Currently, anthropologists consider gender a social construct that helps communities divvy out duties. These social expectations are often assigned at birth based on a baby's sex. As circumstances and personality come into play, individual people can assert a choice, change in their assigned gender roles, generally during the liminal years surrounding puberty or after major life events. Some societies have created third, fourth, fifth defined gender roles, though majority of studied modern societies simply have loosely defined extra-gender people whose choice of labels. Common example is shaman." End quote. What this means to me is that for 100,000 years, hunter-gatherers probably had gender role social constructs that changed very little, having found efficiency and equality between the sexes and balanced roles. The past 10,000 years, with the advent of agriculture, those roles changed. The past 250 years, the advent of the Industrial Revolution, those roles changed again. The past 100 years of higher technology, the roles again needed updating. The last 30 years with the advent of computers, the gender roles have inevitably been affected once more. The last decade with the advent of social media and video game avatars, the gender roles need updating once again. Updating social constructs of gender happens regularly with legal changes lagging behind. It can be hyperlocal, where a woman or man in a community can start performing a necessary duty that hasn't been generally ascribed to their gender, but an acceptance is made. Acceptance rather than exception. It can be groundbreaking against the patriarchy's hierarchical understanding of gender, or it can be accepted fairly easily. Every generation, every stage of life, gender roles are constantly adjusted in the U.S. today, especially with young people. The gender social constructs are facing the need for big changes. Perhaps because of the enormity of the changes in gender roles, the fantasy of an individual changing their gender rather than the changing of each gender's social constructs is growing. The whole of U.S. society has been taught to value a narrow materialistic understanding of individualism while constantly rejecting the constraints and responsibilities of social organization. Civil society has therefore become dysfunctional. Rather than civilly engaging in the process of change, many have found that seemingly impossible. Broken communities have led to less complex cultures, less able to provide for people's needs. This ends up with many who leave in the pursuit of better pastures. With a nation taught in measuring success in economic terms, the devastation to communities of workers moving constantly to new pastures goes less noticed. Many find themselves, therefore, in communes of strangers, and the gender social constructs are pushed from being local, familial acceptance to demands for universal acceptance by laws and courts. As time passes, this creates more individualized alienation from the people in the places where people live. Today, people are replacing their eventual integration into local communities within these narrow online versions, calling these online constructs communities, and the people in them friends. Gives this a credit they don't deserve. Not to fully discredit online community imitations, but often they are better described as echo chambers that keep us alienated and poorly socialized. They simply don't fulfill enough functions to replace real human cultural and civil societal communities. As my uncle once told me, people today are a mile wide and an inch deep. In talking about this, another friend said, this whole concept of identity, and I quote, as something you can create for yourself is very neoliberal. It reminds me of the old trope of a self-made man. Identify however you like, even make it up as a new identity for yourself and call it your gender. The rest of the world will still see you as a man or woman. The real left cares about how the world actually works. End quote. Another friend responded, and I quote, this is ominous on the right path. Indeed, the left should only care about how the world actually works. And the first step in doing that is recognize an inherent failure of all identity. Creating millions of genders is certainly a neoliberal conception, but don't get it twisted into thinking that means man or woman isn't any more substantial than femme polynomade. You can critique the liberal tendencies to create infinite individual identities without getting caught up in right-wing reactionary declarations, which are just as meaningless. End quote. Well, if the real left cares about how the world actually works, please count me in it. Although the concepts of left and right are more ripe to be cleansed of binary thinking than gender. At their core, left and right refers to the French Revolution. Their supporters of the king stood on his right. The supporters of the revolution were on his left. Left and right were the scriptures of where these complex folks literally stood. And I'm sure that the people in that room would be shocked to learn that these directions came to define politics for some over 200 years. Plus, unlike gender, there are no biological considerations to persevere in such a binary. While I cannot deviate from the fact of binary gender, I do support the objectives as individual uh, that an individual chooses to be in front of the gender. I'm not sure about polynomade, but a femme polyman, that's a delightful modern sexual cultural categorization, if that's their choice. A cross-dressing femme poly top gay man. What's wrong with that? That's not good enough. We can add more objectives. How about a permanently cross-dressing, full lifestyle, immersive femme lesbian imitate heterosexual man. Seems more accurate than trans woman lesbian, or if we accept this person's gender self-identification, just plain old lesbian. Obviously, an actual lesbian has a really big problem with that. Okay, folks, that was part two. Part three is coming next. That was a long one. Next one will be shorter. Part three is called I Prefer to Use Pronouns that Correspond to Sex.